Hello lovely people, how are you all doing today? I hope you are warm and cosy wherever you are. I am a bit dishevelled though because I've just come in, got caught in the rain again. Never mind. We're having some more books today, yay! But today we're having a little foray into some of the older books once more. And this first little bit, it's a gorgeous run of books which takes me deep into wilderness and into nature, and oh my goodness, what a lovely run of books. Just one little heads up though, for whatever reason that day I had some problems with the camera and focusing, so there's a little bit of fuzziness in parts. Don't worry, you don't need to go to you know where, the spectacle shop. It was my camera. Those problems have all been resolved now. But anyway, yes, is there anything I need to say about this other than, no. Let's just dive into some wonderful wild places. The last little run of books, they're all, I think Alaska, I think Yukon territory up in the high north of Canada. They're all that kind of sort of subsistence living, wilderness, off-grid type books. So I started with, oh my goodness, this is going to be a long one. I'm wondering, shall I leave the books to another day? No, I tell you what, we'll plough on, because the folk that like the long chatty ones, they can stay tuned, and if other folk don't like the long chatty ones, you can go now if you don't care about books, because I'll just chat about the books now. Right, so first one is called Kings of the Yukon by Adam Weymouth. This came out in 2018. So it's quite a current book for me, unusually. Picked up at the charity shop, of course. Subtitle, An Alaskan River Journey. So the basic premise of it is this young chap, there he is, lives in London, lives on a barge in London. He wanted to follow the route of the salmon on the Yukon. So the journey starts with him right at the headwaters. It's actually not the Yukon, it's one of the ones that feeds into it, but he starts right 2,000 miles upriver. It's hard to imagine a river 2,000 miles long, isn't it, for us in the UK? So his journey, he starts there, and his journey ends up with him at the mouth of the river. That's putting it very simply. I don't want to get political about anything at all, because it's for everyone to make up their own minds. But it's not politics with a capital P, it's politics with a small p. This is definitely a book which at times is quite challenging to read. It challenges our own thoughts, or our own kind of lazy habits or lazy thinking habits. It touches on all sorts of issues of sustainability, climate change, needs in terms of settlers and making money, needs in terms of native peoples and their subsistence living. So it is quite challenging from that point of view. I made a few notes because I don't want to forget. So I did find it's a really beautiful book, exquisitely written. Unbelievably, it's his first book. How can someone write such an exquisite book the first time round? Amazing. He's so eloquent. It's incredibly thought-provoking without, he's not ramming anything down our throats. He doesn't ever kind of put his agenda out there. It's all observation. It's, this is a fact we can observe. What do we do with it? So yeah, it's really beautiful. And I suppose in a nutshell, the whole book is about the sort of the interface between, say, the natural world and and humans, that kind of interface. And there's definitely the feeling throughout of this is us, settlers, Westerners, however you want to call us, and nature, and this is native populations and nature, and how they are so finely enmeshed and both sort of supporting and nurturing each other, as opposed to that. Yeah, really, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful travel story. Obviously, as he canoes, kayaks down the river, he meets all sorts of amazing people along the way, both native peoples and settlers. All sorts about sort of fishing techniques. It's gorgeous. Those people he meets, I want to meet them too. I want to spend hours talking to them. I don't eat fish, but put it this way, by the end of the book, if I ate fish, I tell you one thing, I wouldn't be eating farmed fish, and I wouldn't be eating fish caught in the Yukon. It just seemed bonkers to me, and I checked this out a couple of days after finishing it, going to one of my local supermarkets. Yeah, I can buy a fish caught in the Yukon. It just seems mad. It just seems mad to me that we're so far removed from our food now that we will take these fish out of the Yukon and have them over here. Leave them in the Yukon for the people who live on the Yukon. I don't know, maybe it's a difficult subject, isn't it? It's a big, massive subject. It's a can of worms that I think I don't want to open, but yeah, definitely check it out. Now, what's weird in this, one of the people he meets is the star of my next book. This is one of the books I had for Christmas from Nikki, thank you. And it was weird because when I opened the parcel and I saw Stan Zuray, I was thinking, I know that name for some reason, I know that name. It didn't click straight away. I put the book in my pile of next books to read. And then I went to pick it up again. I thought, I know that name. Why do I know the name? So I Googled it. Of course I know his name. I know his name. This is another nerdy thing of me. I know his name because it's in the list of, if you go into the historical lists of the Iditarod, which is the big dog sled race in Alaska each year. They start in Anchorage and go all the way over to Nome. I've mentioned it before, and it's it's to honour the serum run from the 1920s. But yes, he won Rookie of the Year in, I can't remember now, 83, 84, something like that. So that's where I knew his name from. So Adam, when he's canoeing down the Yukon, meets Stan. So this is an interesting one. It's written by someone else. It's a biography rather than autobiography, which I'm not normally a fan of. I prefer to read that person's account of their life. It looks like a print on demand, and I thought at first, oh no, is it what we used to call vanity publishing? You know, where the book is so rubbish, no publisher will publish it, so you publish it yourself. Ooh. And I was reading the first few pages, and it was a bit sort of, and then he did this, and then he did that. You know, rather like when we go back to school after the summer holidays, we have to write an essay, what I did in my summer. I went to the seaside, and then I saw my nan and granddad, and then we went to the castle. I was thinking, oh gosh. But it picks up, and I got into it. It's a bit listy at the beginning because it's sort of setting the premise. And so this guy, Stan, in his very early 20s, was getting into a lot of trouble. Was it Chicago or Boston? Boston he was living in. Getting into trouble with gangs and stuff. And it's a happy accident. Well, he sort of made the decision, that's it, I'm going to go off and live in the wilderness. So he ends up in Alaska, of course. on the Tanana, was it the Tanana River? I can't remember exactly. Well, he doesn't live exactly anywhere. He lives miles from anywhere. But it's all about how he sort of, and he meets a lass and she wants to have a similar experience, so they hook up. I don't mean as a boyfriend and girlfriend initially, but they say, right, okay, let's do it together. So it's like, yeah, get the cabin built. What are we going to eat? How are we going to eat? Etc., etc. So it was right up my street. And then towards the section towards the end goes into his experience on his first Iditarod. So all along he's had a few dogs, and where he lives, you see, this is another interesting one, isn't it? Coming back to this one, this idea of, you know, the subsistence life, and how much, I really want to talk about this more at some point one day. He has a team of dogs, so that when he has to go to the nearest town to get anything, sacks and sacks of flour, rice, what have you, he brings it all back with his dogs. I'm just going to warn you, there is a chapter in here which is quite hard. It is really, really hard. I love this kind of reading, and, you know, when I was a kid, yeah, I probably did have a very romantic, rose-tinted view of this world, but I can assure you I do not as an adult. I don't eat meat. That's because I'm able to live perfectly well without it in my climate here. If I was living up in this kind of territory, yeah, I would eat meat. Of course I would. I would have to eat meat to survive. And to eat meat to survive would mean I would have to kill. I would do that. I have absolutely no squeamishness about that. If we honour that animal with respect, if we use that whole animal, if that animal is free and happy until that point, I don't have... Oh, look, that's a whole nother can of worms, isn't it? Oh my goodness, this is my can of worms video. Maybe I should just call it can of worms. But yeah, if you are at all squeamish about anything like that, don't read it. But yeah, so I got a bit lost then, didn't I? Yeah, so back to this kind of subsistence and off-gridding and I really have to talk about this, expand on this in another video, but let's just say, if you've got a snow machine, you need gasoline for it, spare parts, etc., etc., etc. That isn't entirely off-grid living. That's all I'll say, because you are relying on someone else for gasoline, for parts, etc., etc. With his team of dogs, he can be off-grid because he can fish for the dog's food, etc. He isn't entirely off-grid either. He is still reliant on other people and other things. This is something I talked about briefly in a video ages ago when I was saying I'm not self-sufficient. And when people say they're self-sufficient, I always take it with a massive pinch of salt, because unless you are cutting down the trees that you build your home from, unless you are skinning animals and making your own clothes from them, unless you are growing all your own food or trapping, shooting, whatever, all your own food, but if you're shooting it, you're not entirely self-sufficient because you've needed to buy a gun and bullets, you see? So it's always that kind of degrees. So I am not self-sufficient, not by a long chalk. I'm self-reliant, that's what I like to say, and I am subsistence, but I'm not self-sufficient. Anyway, so you can see I love these books. They're thought-provoking. They make me question what I do and how I live over and over and over again. And that might seem weird because we're worlds apart. You know, they're in the frozen north. Here am I, you know, in the comfort of a big, safe city. Yeah, I'm definitely going to talk about this more in a separate video, about these kind of parallels with my subsistence life in London and a subsistence life in Alaska, which I know it sounds completely nuts. Bear with me, I will talk about that another day. Anyway, so I finished reading Stan. It was great. It was a real page turner. that was one of those that I ended up staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning to finish. Nikki, thank you so much. Loved it. Then another quick read, and this one came from Antoinette. I keep my little notes inside of who books have come from. I talked about this probably a year ago, but finally I read it. This one, camera can't focus. Sorry, camera. 2 old women, and now hang on. Camera, find my face. Can we get focus again? Anyway, I can see myself now that that's really massively out of focus. It's not even, there's plenty of that. Anyway, 2 Old Women, written by Velma Wallis, who is, I think the story with this story is it's a bit of an old story, a bit of a legend story. It's been handed down through the generations. So I can't remember where Velma lives. Actually, if I remember rightly, it's pretty near. There was a map. I'm going to see if I can find it. It was pretty near where Stan is. No, it's not near where Stan is. I beg your pardon, but it's another. It's very near. It's near the Yukon, so it's another one that Adam went through. I think it's based near Dawson City, I think. Of course, Dawson City wasn't called Dawson City then. It's really lovely. It's a bit of a sort of a fable, if you like. I won't go into too many details in case you want to read it, but 2 very, very elderly, well, in that situation, in a freezing situation, old, their tribe say, we've got no choice but to leave you behind. We're all starving, we need to move, we need to find new hunting, you're slowing us down, so we're going to leave you. Basically, they are leaving them to die. Bear with me, I know it sounds grim. So these 2 old ladies, they're in shock and miserable, and, well, there we go, we've been consigned to death. Of course they don't die. What do? They say, you know what? We're going to go old school. We're going to use the skills we have. We're going to survive. We're going to make it. And yeah, I'm not going to give the ending away, but we follow them on their journey over the course of a year, how they survive, and in the end how they thrive, and in the end how the tribe that abandoned them finds them again when they come back into sort of summer grounds for different kind of hunting, gathering, find the 2 old ladies thriving, and actually the 2 old ladies end up giving the tribe food. I loved it. It's like, yes, us oldies. I mean, I'm not as old as the women in the book, but it was one of those things of, yes, we will prevail. We have skills, you know. Yeah, we may be slower and our joints may be creaky, but we have knowledge, we have skills, we have stuff to contribute. I think that's so true throughout any society, isn't it? Our elders, let's tap our elders for their knowledge. They know stuff. They teach us to knit and sew, apart from anything else. Love it. And then finally, Esther, ages, sorry. And I've lost my note from who it came from. This was sent to me, I think, a couple of years ago. It's been sat on the shelf. I knew I'd get round to it. And I knew I just needed the right run of books to read it in. And I know a lot of my American viewers know this book. We've talked about it briefly before. This is Louise Dickinson Rich's book, We Took to the Woods. This is a lovely edition, 1942. Love it. Map, so I can get my bearings. And it's absolutely full of, let me show you their cabins. It's full of photos. It's an uncut edge, the book, so you can't flick through it easily. I'll try it. Oh, I can't find the picture I want to show you. Sorry, I'm going to annoy myself. I'm going to try and talk and look for the picture. Oh, there it is. It's hiding. So there's their place, deep in the woods. Now, this family are in Maine. They're right on the border with New Hampshire and I can't remember which bit of Canada they butt up to. Is it Ontario that they butt up to, or Alberta? No, Alberta's more in the middle, isn't it? Anyway, it's right tucked up there, so it's cold. It's sweet, it's very sweet, it's very charming, it's totally lacking in peril, the kind of peril that's in all of these books. It's quite cosy, it's not off-grid living, it's not really even subsistence living. She's making a living as a writer. You know, they can buy stuff. They buy all their food. I mean, they really do pretty much buy everything so far. I'm only about, I'm slightly over halfway. They may pick a bit of fruit from time to time. They may go fishing from time to time, but they are not subsistence living. They buy. The similarity is the fact of how cut off they are. So again, it's this thing of they have to be highly organised. If they're going to go shopping, you know, it's days away. You do a whole month, 2, 3, 4 months shopping even in one go. Get it back there in consideration of how will roads be, how will rivers be as we head into winter, that sort of thing. So you know, if you're into your wilderness sort of survival, subsistence, off-grid living type things, then yes, you love these. But if you want something a bit more gentle with a bit less peril, a bit less, let's say, the gruesome aspect of surviving, as in what you eat, then I think you might like this. It's really charming. It's interesting because it's 1942, I think it's 1942 this was published. Yeah, 1942. The writing actually feels more modern than that. I don't think it's not modern, like right now modern, but it definitely feels, it doesn't feel arcane. It's funny in my mind as I'm reading it, I've got pictures of Little House on the Prairie, the Waltons. So from that you get the idea of it's a much more mellow take on wilderness living. It's very it feels very happy and relaxed and lovely, and like I say, with no peril. So yeah, we took to the woods, and apparently I think there's at least one more that she wrote on their lives there. So I'll certainly keep an eye out for that. Oh yes, such a lovely run of books. I loved all of them. That was in the February, and then I didn't talk about books again until I think it was the middle of September, because of course I got really busy in the garden and with other things, and reading is generally a winter pastime. But I did make some time for the next book in, yes, I think, it was 7 months later. It was in September when I sat down to read this jewel of a book, Monty Don's The Jewel Garden. So I think pretty much all of us are familiar with Monty from Gardener's World. I rarely see it. If I see one episode in the entire season, you know, it's like, wow, miracle. If it was on at midnight, I would probably watch it. Probably still wouldn't, if I'm honest. It's just, anyway. But I think we're all familiar with him, and this book, it's called The Jewel Garden, subtitle, A Story of Despair and Redemption. So I think anyone who does watch Gardener's World and watches Monty, we all know what he means when he talks about the Jewel Garden. This has been a really interesting read for me. It's a book of two halves. The first half is, okay, easy to stop. The second half is a diary of making the jewel garden. It's sort of like a diary of a year, and it's both he and Sarah. It's both of their writings throughout. Great. Someone said to me recently, oh, he's such a poet when he writes. I disagree. I don't think he's a poet when he writes. I don't think he's any great literary writer. I'm not having a go. Love the guy to bits. But it's not, I don't think his writing is anything special at all. That second part, the jewel garden part, it's actually very mundane writing. It's almost like a list. Today we did this, today we did that. But that's fine. It's lovely, you know, enjoyed it. The first half of the book is really different and a very different tone. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit in the last few days. There were times, actually, it really depressed me and I didn't want to read the book. But on reflection, I was thinking that that was to do with my mindset and when I was reading it. Because that first part I read, I didn't read the whole first part. It happened in thirds just because of the timing of it. On 3 different railway train trips down to Auntie Teapot's. So each time I was on my way down there, I was reading a third of that first section. So it's maybe it was my mindset because I was on my way to my great aunt's that I was already a bit heavy of heart. I don't know. But it talks about, it goes back in their life, right back to sort of the 80s, their jewellery business and how things went pear-shaped. I'm not giving anything away by saying that. I think it's kind of well known, well documented. So yeah, I found it really heavy going. And I don't know that that's what I wanted to read. Maybe that's what it was. It's just not the right thing for me to read at that time. I'm glad I stuck with it though, because firstly, it's really interesting to find out how they've ended up at Longmeadow and to find out more about that. Now you see, here's the big slap in the face to myself. Here's my own prejudice. Because Monty's name is Montague, so in the UK that's quite a posh name. There's no two ways about it. You don't get many kids on the estate where I grew up called Montague, and if they did, they'd be beaten up every day. So it's a posh name. And obviously Monty speaks really well. So I had always assumed, and this is what I mean, it's showing my own prejudice and bad on me, that's why I say give myself a slap. I'd always assumed he came from money. Always assumed he had money. So I look at Longmeadow and I think, yeah, but it's all right for you, isn't it? Because you've got a ton of cash, mate. I mean, that thought is only flickering and then it disappears because I don't care, frankly. I don't care about your money, Monty. Your garden is lovely. And I think what's lovely about him is it comes through the screen that he's just this beautifully quiet, serene soul. He feels very self-contained to me, very private. And it's almost like we're privileged to spend some time with him in his garden. And it's beautiful. And I love it. I love that. I love that quality in him. I don't know him in person, so I can't say. He might be an absolute git in real life. I doubt it very, very much, especially now having read it. So yeah, I had always assumed that he came from money and that he had money. So it was a real shocker to me to hear just how poor they've been and just what a huge struggle at times. You know, they've got their couple of little kids. They haven't got 2 pennies to rub together. Scary when you've got kids, when you've got a family as well. So I'm really glad, if for no other reason than to kind of discover that and to just wipe out all those years of prejudice I had. Not prejudice, because it didn't make me not like him. Assumptions, it wiped out all those assumptions I had. I never disliked him for thinking, oh, he's rich and posh. I would never dislike someone for that. A stupid reason to dislike someone. But I had made those assumptions and they just wiped out in a second. So yeah, I'm glad I read it for that reason. But no, I don't think it's particularly poetic. I think because the subject matter in the first half of the book, that whole sort of talking about emotions and really, really quite hard, deep depressions, that could come over as being poetic. But yeah, glad to have read it. It's already earmarked for someone else. So thank you so much, Trisha. It's already been asked for by someone else, by a friend, so it will move along to someone else and they can read and enjoy it and have all of their assumptions swept aside. My verdict on Jewel Garden seemed a bit, didn't it? I did enjoy reading it. I'm glad I had the opportunity. And, you know, if nothing else, it's that reminder, isn't it, of how the wonder of reading. You know, we read for entertainment, we read for company, we read to expand our minds. And sometimes when we read and have our assumptions, prejudices, whatever, our fixed ideas, we have them knocked aside. Great. You get that from reading. Yay! Right, well, I don't need to go on about the wonders of reading. If you're watching these book videos, it's probably because you enjoy reading too, so I don't need to tell you how fantastic books are, do I? All right, my lovelies, that's it for today, and the next book video, I don't know what in terms of life, but the next book video will be coming back to current reading. I'm just looking over there at the ones. Oh, yes! I've got some fab ones to talk about. I can't wait. I have to wait though until then. So, until the next time, whether it's a book video that you're just tuning in for books or any of the other stuff, I will see you really soon, I hope. Until then, take care of yourselves, stay cosy, and happy reading. Cheerio.